You may have 100 or 200 different development teams working at a business in different languages and different time zones. But in the same way that we want the user experience and the user interface to be equal across those, they've got that instantly recognizable brand.
Aidan Kniff, he, him. Today, I'm here with Alex Savage, and we're going to be talking about API review and the human side of building APIs with your team. So,
yeah, cool. Thanks, Aidan. So, hey, everybody. My name's Alex Savage. My pronouns are he and him. I'm kind of a API nerd, like APIs, which is hopefully what we're going to talk about today. I'm fairly new to this business. I've been working in APIs probably for around 4 years now, but it was very much a dive straight in and understand all of the possibilities. And one of the things that we care a very large amount about is API reviews and how that goes about working as a process, and how we can really understand what people are feeling, what do they want, and how do we get the best out of those situations.
so I know for me as a developer, and I'm sure a lot of people watching today, we're really aware of what it's like to give a code review to one of our peers that we're working on something with every day. What's an API review, and how is it different? What should the audience know about them?
It's subtly different. Ideally, API review, probably you're doing design first, maybe with some standard, maybe using JSON schema, maybe you're doing open API, but you're describing that behavior in a universal way that's not tied to your implementation. And that way you've got somebody coming in on a review that maybe they don't understand your code, maybe they don't even know the language that you're writing it in, but it's not so much about the code, it's about what's the problems that they're trying to solve. So really trying to take that outside in approach rather than an inside out, and saying, I'm going to look at your API, I'm going to be looking for things like, does it make sense? I don't know your product, perhaps I do, but I'm really trying to put myself in the consumer's position and say, if I was a consumer reading your API documentation, what am I going to learn from it? Am I going to screw my face up and go, wow, I've never seen something like that before? Or am I going to go, yep, these people have understand the problem that I have, and that's why I'm here to use their API.
I think what's really interesting, you said something about being sort of the advocate of the consumer. And I think that's such an important role, and a great thing to make explicit, because when you are doing these API reviews, you have to sort of, think about what you value, and what you value is consistency. You value the experience, the law of the least astonishment. Those are all great things. But I don't know if it's in every single developer's head, especially people who haven't worked on APIs before. So I imagine this is hard for you to, work with potentially hundreds of different people that aren't right on your team that you work with every day. Like, how do you give feedback in that kind of situation when it might be about something that the team doesn't necessarily understand, and it's coming from someone they might not interface with every single day?
I think you've got two aspects there. The human aspect I'll talk a little bit about first, and I'll maybe share a little story of when I originally started doing API reviews. It was just me. I had nobody else in my team. I've got a nice team of people now. And I had people coming at me saying, hi, I've been told you're the person to talk to for an API review. Here you go. And then I'm there like eyeballing line by line, like multi-thousand line open API definition in YAML, trying to make sense of it, trying to understand what's the story these people are trying to tell, what's the problem that they've solved with it. Over and above, is that resource name a plural noun? Is it cased correctly? Is the pagination in there? Is the pagination right? Have they considered sort orders? Many, many, many questions, thinking about that painting again. Have all of the right tools been used? Does it look good? And that was a massive drain on time, and it's something that people never saw. They just thought, oh, I'll give this review, and then I get back some comments and I fix them, and then we have a little cycle. So that, from a reviewer's point of view, was quite hard, trying to fulfill both a more traditional review of is the code, is the YAML or JSON or whatever it is that correct? Is it valid open API? Because we still see some API definitions today. You download it and it's there as Swaggy UI. You put it through a validator and it says, whoop, this is not valid open API. And you go, why? How did that happen? How did somebody publish something that isn't isn't valid open API? And the honest answer is people just don't know. You only know what you know. So I had this sort of 3 levels of review. First of all, is it valid open API? And we were using a tool that made sure that it was. Second question, does it fit our style guide? Style guide that says thou shalt do this, 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 and this. And then the third bit, which is probably the most important of all of them, is does this make sense? Is it usable? And is it valuable? And that's really the special sauce that us as reviewers need to focus on. The other 2 things, they're kind of a distraction. And this is where I'm going to say linters really come into their own. As maybe we're using standard, we're using linters on our code today. But I would challenge to say, if you're doing anything with open API, doing design, it doesn't matter if it's design first or even if it's code first, get going with a linter, and that takes away that first and second level. As a default,
you get to have the conversation you want to have, like this value conversation, because everything else is hopefully something the developer can do on their own.
Absolutely. It's how do you be everywhere and also nowhere at the same time? Because you've got the internal conflict of having a code review effectively, or a review from someone who you don't know, somebody not in your team, somebody who is billed as perhaps an expert. And it really, from a personal point of view, I kind of describe it as almost going back to school and handing your homework in and somebody going through red penning it, wrong, wrong, wrong. You get a negative feeling over that interaction. And especially if you're new or you've not done it before, you could legitimately have hundreds of review comments. And as a person, that's really like, it hurts. You think you're done, and then somebody comes through and they're just like, you're not even anywhere near done. And it takes away the importance and the power of that conversation. I haven't managed to talk to you about that. I don't understand your API. At the moment, I'm just telling you that you've used the wrong casing and this needs to be required and you're not allowed to do that and you're not allowed to do this. And it really distracts from the important thing of, does it make sense? Is it a good API? So this is really where we kind of look to the automation tools, the linters out there that deal with those first 2 concerns. First concern is easy. It's easy. First concern is possible. There's lots of linters out there that you run it and it will say it's valid against the open API specification. That's kind of like the do not pass go minimum level. But there's lots of linters out there that allow you to take that to the next level and start, I'm not going to say the word enforcing, start informing people, warning people where they are not compliant with perhaps that business's own rule book. Because like REST is an architectural constraint. It's not a protocol. It's a bit like the pirate code, Pirates of the Caribbean, right? It's more of a guidelines than a code per se, and everyone's subtly different. And that's really where you've got to kind of work out, what does an API at your business look like? Write that down and say, okay, that's our style guide. Now, how do I make sure that everybody in the business has probably not read this pretty wordy document?
Yeah, people don't read big PDFs.
Exactly, right? If it's a PDF or a Confluence page, you're in trouble. How do people get that in a usable way so that really your review is very much focused on, it's not a syntax thing, it's met all of our bare minimum requirements, and it's really on those outside in thinking, no distractions. And then the conversation you have with someone is probably a lot more easy and meaningful when you're just being able to ask them questions around, what is it that perhaps if you're unsure, it's like, what does that do?
Yeah.
What do I want it to do as a consumer? Have we seen any other examples of it? What does PayPal do?
Yeah.
What do other people do? So you can get straight to that with really important questions rather than being distracted by the noise.
Yeah, when you're working with let's say a new engineer or like a new API team who's still figuring a lot of this out, what do you lead with? Do you lead with let's say they have 100 comments just about the YAML or about the standards, or do you try to lead with the important conversation even in those situations? Because I imagine like that first impression you have on a team that you don't work with is really important to building the relationship.
I would say with new teams, we kind of flip it the other way and say, instead of being a reviewer, let's jump in with a team and do maybe like an API sketching session. So we're not going to leave that session. The goal isn't to have like a, give them an API. Is to go in there at the beginning and say, why are we even making an API? What's the problem that you're trying to solve that other people consume? And then starting to have those early conversations there to say, okay, then, as a consumer, you're trying to, oh goodness, let's say it's like a payment system or something. So you're there trying to get those words out to say, in your world, in your product, what are these key resources that are moving around? And get those early conversations in, like, don't just expose your database model because your database isn't an API. What is it that the consumer wants to do? So it's actually better with new teams to go to them and say, if you're doing your first ones, let's help you with that early sketch, and then kind of send you on your way and say, okay, we've got an idea of some resources, that's a list that needs to have pagination, and then you're kind of feeding through the concepts as they go. So you're saying, this is a list of payment transactions. How many could there be? Oh, there could be millions. Okay, so this is how we do pagination. Let me give you the standard for it. And then you're just trying to pen down and kind of just high level design what an interaction would be like. And then you kind of send them away and say, take this conversation, get us a draft open API. It doesn't have to be finished. You don't need like every query parameter ever possible. Just get something, get it mockable. So lots of tools will include like a mocking capability, and then just start using it. Pretend it's a real API, use it, give it to people, ask them for feedback. If you think like at this point, we've not actually written a line of traditional code. We've designed something in a declarative format. We've shoved it at a tool, and then we're there using, a REST tool like Postman or something to try it out and say, how does this feel? Does it feel any different to PayPal or, Stripe or one of the other payment processors? What is a consumer going to think? Because there are so many people doing APIs now. The bar is ever rising, and people have very high expectations on what okay looks like.
So I think one of the interesting things I hear from people who are just starting out in a position like yours, responsible for API reviews at companies, is this sort of question, like, and I'll pose it to you, like, how do you get developers to care, in big quotes, about APIs? Because I think a lot of people understand the product and they do want to build something that's like valuable, but I don't know if it's obvious to every developer on every team that a good API is part of getting there. So I'm curious what your opinion is about that general question, what you've tried internally and what's worked.
I think so. There's two ways. You can go the bottom up, you can go top down, or you can do both. You can, some full API lifecycle providers out there say, you must start with your API strategy. And normally a strategy is going to be like, we will do design first. There will always be an API. It's just as important as a user interface. That is our mantra. Do it. Or as Jeff Bezos said a few years ago, 20 something years ago, all APIs will be externalizable, meaning they will be used by other teams or you're fired.
Yeah.
So you do the top down approach and you just say, this is the law. The bottom up approach, which is probably more preferable, is you explain to people about the opportunities. I think it was the MuleSoft CTO that said, participate in the API economy allows others to innovate on your behalf, something like that. I think that's a really powerful statement to say, you build something, you're kind of a bit like Lego. You're putting these capabilities out there, and who knows what people will build on it. But it's another way to make valuable stuff.
I think that's a really good story, because I think, no developer like wakes up in the morning and is like, I want to break my consumers today, or like publish a bad API. So this idea of like API review as like a policing function, like I don't think is particularly useful. So it's really, I mean, maybe even the word is wrong. Like, is it, I know some people use enablement. What do you think about this? Like, should we even think of them as reviews, or are they like access to, resources that help you build a better product? Do we need to like do some rebranding here?
I think so. So we call ourselves like the API and integrations team. We used to be the API You said it, enablement team, Center for Enablement, using that's popular C4E one. What we found out is most people don't really know what a C4E is. People are very much used to seeing the traditional COE, Center of Excellence, you know, the super special people that you reel in and say, oh, I need a mobile app. I don't know how to do whatever this mobile app's written in. They said, don't worry about it. We got you. And then they go and code and they deliver something. And they're the people that you call. We were like, we don't want to be that. That's like the anti-pattern, because you're hoarding all of the knowledge and you're also then the biggest bottleneck. It's like, oh, we need an API. And they're like, talk to those people.
Yeah.
So we said like, no, we're not doing that. We definitely went on the enablement way. And we kind of talk about, you know, we build the stadiums, we like put the fences up to keep people safe, but ultimately we want to be there like cheering from the sidelines on saying, you know, go, 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 do that. Maybe sometimes we need to show, you know, don't go the other way. You know, don't do that. But ultimately we want people to come and like play in the sandbox area, keep them safe, but don't stifle the innovation, because everyone's got something special about them that they know that other people don't, or a unique point of view. How do we put people out there to say, go and build that, go and make that, and for them to be their idea brought to life? There needs to be some constraints, needs to be some guidance. Choose my words carefully here, but like things like rules, things like policing. Anytime we see that, it's kind of like, that's not what we want. And we even call people out and say, if you feel that conversations are feeling a bit like police interrogations, please call it out. That is not the relationship we want with the teams that we're enabling. It's very much a, you know, we're here to share the love, right? We talk about APIs for everyone. You know, how can we get other people finishing an interaction and being okay about maybe they got some bad feedback on something. Maybe there's more work to do when they thought they were done. But how does somebody finish that conversation going, I'm really glad we had that conversation, because otherwise bad things would have happened.
Yeah.
Rather than going, I'm sad because someone said the thing I made was bad.
Yeah. I remember I took this creative writing class once, and this professor somehow could give the most like critical, like, you know, should have damaged ego feedback possible. Like every page in the writing, like completely like redlined, like everything needs to change. The whole idea, you know, on page 2 is wrong. But somehow the way that he did it, I was always like excited to go make the changes. Like I would leave that room like running to the library, like not really, but like, you know, excited to go out and actually make it better. And I think that's a skill. Like it takes practice, but being able to just like show people that it's coming from the right place. So like one of our, you know, values on our team when we do review is to just assume good intent, like in both directions. Like assume that, you know, the person is doing the best to build the API that they're building, and then also assume that the person reviewing it cares about the customer, isn't just trying to like add work to the person's, you know, calendar, and is really just trying to like build the best product possible too. And that's like a great place to have as a starting point. Like together we are building the best product we can.
I think one of the things, so I'm going to share a story and say, you know, we're human beings, right? Everyone fails. You know, people make mistakes. I remember having a conversation with a team that showed their API and they were really proud of it. And unfortunately, it was missing a few things that you'd expect on like a normal API today. And I gave them some feedback. And one of the videos that we love and we sort of joke about is there's a song called Your API is a Hall of Shame, right? And it goes through and says things like, you know, your errors return 200 okay. You know, you promised me JSON but sent XML. Really, it's a fantastic video. I recommend anybody watches it. But I sort of linked it, not in any malice at all, just to kind of say that the things that your API does are so well known that somebody wrote a song about it. And what happened is that team refused to talk to me for over a year.
Wow.
It just completely closed that conversation down. And it's like one of my biggest regrets. But I learned that person felt like it was a personal assault. Someone said to me, Alex, it's like you called their child ugly. And I said, that is not at all what I meant to happen. I was just trying to use this as a sort of, you know, an enablement aid to say, you know, I wouldn't push ahead with what you've got, because people are consuming it will go, wasn't expecting it to do that. So what I would say is be careful. We now use radical candor as a kind of idea, and that's there as about trying to get real trust between two people. The story of radical candor is here is, imagine you're in a meeting room, like we're in a meeting room with 4 or 5 other people, and then one of our colleagues walks in and their flies down on their trousers. Just like, what do you do? Like, do you then like turn around to everyone and say, yeah, everyone, look, the person's flies are down. How does that make them feel? Like, they feel like it's a personal assault, they feel wronged. You're not going to have a good interaction with that person afterwards. The other options are you go, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do about that. Or it might hurt their feelings. Or it might make them. You start worrying about your own feelings. You go, what might they think of me if I've said it? Or you go, oh, I can't do anything. It'll upset them. But the radical candor thing is, I'm just going to lean over to them and whisper in their ear and say, by the way, your fly's down. And it gets sorted.
Yeah.
And that's really the way that we want to be working with reviews, is to think about the delivery mechanism. Think about the audience. Like, am I going to give this feedback to the team, to the designer? When am I going to give it? I don't want to give negative feedback on like a stakeholder meet with loads of important people, because then it looks like you're maneuvering. The team feel like, well, that wasn't very helpful. I've now got like senior stakeholders saying, why is this expert or this person said that this stuff's no good?
Yeah.
Really, like, don't build hall of shames or wall of shames. Don't pit people against each other. It's a very private thing. You don't want to hurt people, because what happens with them, they just go, I'm never talking to that person.
The last question around sort of starting review programs. I think a lot of teams are at this point where they'd love to start with the Audi of APIs, but there's going to be people saying, I have 4 different car brands. One of them's 20 years old, one of them's 5 years old. I have to bring these things kind of forward to the end of their lives and also start sort of the new API program. How do people how should people think about that, and how do they take on the challenge of like legacy that might not ever be able to come up to sort of the new standards?
I think that's where that pragmatism has to come in, to say, as we've evolved over the last sort of 3 years, our linting rule set becomes ever more opinionated every day. We kind of have a rule that if somebody does something unexpected, there'll be a rule for it. So literally this week, I had somebody give me an API, paginated everything, and then I went in and just broke the pagination. I said, okay, then it returns all those things. What if I just asked for 1 million items? And then it gave me. I was like, okay, so we've got a gap. So we're telling people you need to paginate. We've written like a meta schema that says, you can do cursor pagination like this. You can do like offset like this, and you can do number of pages like that. But we've missed the bit that says, if you have a limit, it needs to have an upper limit as well. Yeah. So a rule gets added to the backlog to say, if I've got an open API with limit, it needs to have like a default. What is your default? If I don't send you my limit, what are you going to give me? Because most APIs, the first time you use it, you're not crafting this perfect request with all the query parameters. You're just saying like, slash resource, send it, see what happens. And what's the default behavior? And then what's the upper limit? So it's really about, how do you start small? How do you make the new stuff new and shiny, the Audi of APIs? But how do you pick out things which are like the non-negotiable ones? And that's really where we use I can't remember which RFC 12 or whatever it is, like must, should, and could. We kind of have those and say like security is non-negotiable. You must have security defined. You must have this, blah, blah, blah. It must be on the definition. And it kind of doesn't matter, how old your API is. You're going to have some security on it. So make sure that's documented. And then it's about fine tuning those remaining requirements to say which of them are like no conversation is needed. If it's not that, you should block the pipeline. They should just be, that's non-negotiable. And then all of the other things, try and make them a shoulds. They're saying we strongly recommend that you do this, but if you can't, it's okay. And that's really where I've seen other people using tools that can handle like in time changes to rule sets, or what I've seen is quite popular with the linter that we use, you can extend somebody's rule set and say, I'll take the core one, but I'm going to make like a heritage edition of it. So I'm going to go and tune these things down because I don't want to be, if I've got a big API that's 10 years old, predates any of these rules, it could legitimately have thousands of non-compliance. How do I just tune that down? How do I just turn that off and just say, there's no point having this conversation because it's just not possible.
Yeah.
But how do you have like a rule set that says, this is the total bare minimum for any API? So tune the rules, turn them down, turn them off, but still have some. And then have it that if you create something new, you get like the full shebang. This is what good looks like. And then you, without making breaking changes in your rule set, you then iterate forward until you get to the point where we are, where we've got to release a breaking change of our rule set. Because we now need to ask people to do something as a must. And we can't just do that today. Because if I put a new rule in that says, you must do this, I'll then have hundreds of teams going, what? That wasn't the rules when we made it. You can't just do that. And we would do a breaking change on their rule set, which could stop their pipeline because they've got it in their CI/CD and said, if I see a must, we can't go forward with it. So we've got to that point there where we're going to have to release a new major version of our rules and say, if you're making new, this is the new. Otherwise, if it's not new and it's an evolution, these are your ones. And then you've kind of got your heritage stuff here as well.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think getting to the point where you're having that problem means that a lot of other things are working well, which is great. And it's also one of these good things about being pragmatic. Like it is a breaking change to fix in quotes, older APIs. And we clearly can't do that because our, value of don't break consumers is more important than our value of consistency. So like, it's just important to write all that stuff down. And I think that's why having like, these priorities like spelled out and understood by the teams help everyone understand like what the right decision is. But yeah, you're right. The worst thing that can happen is to have like, to get an A on the paper and then find out next week that you get a B-. Like and the paper hasn't changed. It's just something's different now. So figuring out how to like do governance, but like for the future, like towards the future is I think an important stage that teams get to. Is there anything else you'd like to share with people who care about API review stuff, things you're excited about? This has been a really great conversation, and I hope that it helps people sort of think about how to kickstart their programs and really focus on the human side of them. But what else would you share with the audience sort of as we wrap up here about your experiences?
I think what I'd say is, I'll talk about like the community. I said before, like one of my friends said API could be for like all people inclusive as an acronym. I'd say the community around APIs, that's how we met, right? It's one of the most friendly, welcoming communities. When I started out, I asked some questions on Stack Overflow, immediately got shut down. Oh, this is an opinionated question. We can't answer that. Boom. And it just got closed. And that was my first experience, like asking questions to a community. And it really left me with that wasn't very nice. I didn't like that. There's loads of communities out there, based on where you are or just the fact that you like APIs, right? And there's just people out there from all over them, big firms and small firms that are kind of just muddled together into these melting pots where people just ask questions and see answers. So I think my advice to anyone would be, maybe watch some API Days videos, see what's going on there, go to a conference and just reach out to people. There's the Open API team, they're really friendly. Maybe like async APIs, like Fran and Lukash that run those communities. Like, these are the people that drive forward the standards used by millions of people. And you know what? They're just people like us, just trying to do a good job. They're really friendly people. So just, reach out, start building this network. We're stronger together. Winning's a team sport. And that's really what APIs are about, right? I put some possibilities out, someone builds on it. And then maybe they then build something on top of that. And, you end up with this value chain of people connected together who are all enabling each other to, keep the lights on, pay the bills. And it's really got to be open, be welcoming, and you'll find other people are the same. that my biggest learning has been from the people around me. That's how I found the linter, the spell checker. I was doing spell checking APIs. I just put it something on Twitter to say, anyone codes, spell checking APIs. And someone's like, yeah, check out Code Spell Checker.
Yeah.
Just some random person on Twitter. I have no idea who they were. I don't ever spoken to them since then. So just don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
That would be what I should have said.
I absolutely love it. I think the kinds of people who work in APIs, have really bought in all the way to the idea that like products are built by putting a lot of people's best work together, and you have to make it accessible and usable. And the modern products, like if we look at what software is today, it's like built on infrastructure that is, APIs that, are being called on infrastructure providers, with like all these libraries built by other people that actually run the stack, and all these databases built by communities of thousands of contributors, like with this cool library, and then these 20 APIs we call out to built by people we've never met. And like, that's what software is. It's like a tapestry. Back to your, painting art example, it's a tapestry. And the kinds of folks who, make their threads or paint colors available to the community really believe that everything should be that way and want to help out. So I think that's a great place to end today, is just, we want to help out. And you're on Twitter, right? You're also on the APIs You Won't Hate Slack a lot, which I'll link in the description. And we'll try to put a bunch of other resources here to get people started if you're at the beginning of the journey. And good luck, and also build some great stuff. Looking forward to using everyone's APIs.
100%.
Awesome.